Check the description for the following discount codes. Under normal circumstances, I would buy in whatever new VR headset it is that I wanted to review for sim racing purposes. But in this instance, from Meta, or Oculus as some of us will fondly remember them, if you've owned a Quest 2, which I have, and I've reviewed that both as a standalone headset, a PC VR headset, and for sim racing, and then you've owned a Quest 3, which is what I have currently here in my hands with its respective controllers, and again, reviewed this for all its various applications, then you have effectively owned a Quest 3S. The reason for that is because they have taken some of the things from the Quest 3 and some of the things, hardware, this is, from the Quest 2, and they've put it together in a more affordable package, you might say. And that's what we're going to go through today, because I've thorough experience with both of them. I upgraded from the Quest 2 to the Quest 3 to make use of the higher res, the pancake lenses, the more balanced form factor, the nicer controllers. But we'll go through everything today, and this is from a sim racing point of view. So things like standalone functionality is irrelevant, even the controllers are irrelevant, because for sim racing, of course, we don't use them. So let's talk about, first of all, the things that it shares in common with the Quest 2, which is my predecessor to this headset here. This is where they're saving cost, of course, as well. It's really focusing on the displays. They use the Fresnel lenses from the Quest 2. Now, whilst Meta probably made the best Fresnel lenses on the market, they are still Fresnel lenses. So that means you're going to have a smaller sweet spot, you're going to have some God rays, and the headset itself, compared to the Quest 3, is noticeably thicker because pancake lenses have a much slimmer profile. This also makes the Quest 3S more front heavy than what the Quest 3 is. Even though I think they're within a gram of weight between the two, if you have something protrude further in front of you from the fulcrum, the point of balance, it's going to feel heavier. And so with it being thicker, forward of your forehead, it's going to feel a little bit heavier. The Quest 2 was never what you call a heavy headset, but when you have something that's a bit more balanced or lower profile and feels nicer, and then you go back to something that isn't, you notice the difference. Neither of the Quest 3 or the Quest 2 have batteries in the rear from standard, so none of them are as perfectly balanced as what the old Pico 4 was. You can see this one tilts to the front. If I were to release my grip a little bit more, it will actually slide. The Pico 4, I'll just grip this, would sit perfectly like that with no grip. You can see I'm obviously pulling it back to keep it there, and I'm squeezing the strap to do it. So neither of them are perfectly balanced like the Pico 4. Pico 4 was a good headset for its time. It's a shame it didn't get the success really that it could have done, but it lacks the support and the software library of Meta, for example, so it was never going to. But yeah, anyway, Fresnel lenses, smaller sweet spot, God rays, a fatter headset, more frontal weight. The other thing it shares, again talking about the displays, is it has a fixed 3-position interpupillary distance adjuster, so you can't just get the lenses, to get the best image, you want the middle of the lenses to line up perfectly with the middle of your own eyes. With this, you can do that using the wheel at the bottom here. It will move them in small steps. With the Quest 2 and the Quest 3S, you've got a choice of positions 1, 2, or 3. So hopefully your eyes fall pretty close to one of those. Otherwise, you are not going to have the best experience straight out the box. The other thing they're carrying over from the Quest 2, in addition to the lenses and the IPD adjustment, is the LCD panels themselves. So this Quest 3S has the same resolution as the Quest 2, which is 1832 by 1920 per eye, maximum of 120 Hertz refresh rate. The Quest 3, like I have here, is 2064 by 2208 per eye. That is the physical resolution of the panels. We will talk about the render resolution in a minute when I compare the Quest 3S to the Quest 3. So they're really the main things it takes from the Quest 2. It shares the strap with the Quest 2 and the Quest 3. They both come with like a fabric strap. The one you see here is the Elite option. The fabric strap's probably in the loft somewhere, but it's something you'll just change instantly if you're someone that's going to consider one of these for sim racing, or in fact anybody. If you can afford to upgrade the strap, you will, because the fabric strap, albeit it works, it isn't the most comfortable. These are much nicer. Now, let's talk about what it shares with the Quest 3, which is of course what I have here in my hands. It shares the same Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 processor and the same 8 gig of RAM. So what this means is the Quest 3S, and this isn't really applicable for sim racing, but it can play Quest 3 exclusive games, whereas obviously the Quest 2 can't because they're Quest 3 exclusives. Doesn't really apply to sim racing because we'll be using these either tethered or wirelessly to our PCs to play our sim racing titles. So it doesn't really make any difference at all. It shares, again, more things that aren't really going to matter. It shares the same color pass-through as what the Quest 3 does, same resolution, same cameras. So it's useful when you're sat in your sim rig. If you want to just, in this case, tap the side, I think there's a dedicated button to flick through on the Quest 3S. Or there might actually be the power button, can't remember now. But it's useful if you need to check something, or perhaps you want to change steering wheel if you're going from one genre of racing to another and you don't want to take the headset off. Then you can just use a color pass-through to do that. Or maybe even you want to check a text message or something, because the color pass-through is good enough to be able to do that now. Or perhaps even adjust something, you know, on your triple screens or your PC screen or whatever in Windows, and you don't want to take the headset off, you can. Not that it's a massive effort to take the headset off, really. But yeah, color pass-through is the same as the Quest 3. And again, something else that really doesn't matter for sim racing, it uses the same controllers as what I have here for the Quest 3 on the Quest 3S. You might remember the Quest 2 controllers had big tracking rings around the top. So what's interesting here from a sim racing point of view is that all the things it shares with the Quest 3 are of no benefit from a sim racing point of view. They are all useful for either standalone VR, where you're running games on the headset itself, or for PC VR titles that aren't sim racing, ones that might use controllers, you know, boxing or first person shooters or whatever it might be. Us as sim racers, all we really care about is the comfort and the visual experience. So, and perhaps the audio as well. Again, it comes with built-in strap audio, just the same as this and the Quest 2, not really a whole lot in it. Me personally, I have big speakers over there that I want my car audio to come out of, and even if I'm racing in VR, which I don't do terribly often, I still wouldn't want to use small speakers, and I don't like the idea of a VR headset with then a set of headphones. You're just starting to get too many things that can move around independently on your head, particularly if you play rally like me and you have a motion rig like me. Then having your headset move around a little bit when you're being thrown around, having your headphones move around, it's all just a pain. Far easier just to not use the audio in this and use it, you know, having a sound system on your rig, because again, we're sat in a seat pretty much in the same position. So it's not like when you play normal VR games where you're moving around, you want the audio to come with you. That doesn't really apply in sim racing. So again, the speakers that are in it, they make no difference to us either. At least I wouldn't think so. Microphones on all of these headsets do sound nice and clear. So should you want to be, you know, in a group session and you're chatting to other racers, that works well also. Now, there's a few things that are exclusive to the Quest 3S that neither the Quest 3 has or the Quest 2. The first one, which is quite interesting, is the Quest 3S has infrared emitters, which means it can see in total darkness, and the tracking will work perfectly in total darkness. Now, you might think, what's that got to do with sim racing? Well, not a lot, but if, like me, you have a sim racing booth that is pretty enclosed and perhaps you're doing a night race. I don't have my overhead lights on. I want to feel that I'm in the car. I've got those triples that come around me. I don't want to be able to see at the very edges of my vision, my white walls illuminated. So I have the lights off. And whilst I don't think I've experienced any tracking loss with this or the Quest 2 when I had it, I don't remember specifically testing it in a night race at night time in real life with all the lights off, because at that point in time headsets didn't work well in darkness, so I wouldn't have turned the lights off other than perhaps to try it and go, oh, it doesn't work, unsurprisingly, because there's no light. The tracking cameras need to be able to see. But the new Quest 3S with infrared emitters, you can use it in total darkness. The hand tracking works as well. So for me, in my rig over there, winter time, it gets dark early, the lights are off, I'm doing a night race, I wouldn't have any tracking issues, or at least I shouldn't. Who knows how those infrared emitters would work, bouncing infrared light off of 3 quite reflective displays. Who knows whether that will cause issues or not. I'm not going to get to find out, because, as I say, I'm not going to buy one, and you'll see why when I conclude, because I've already had a Quest 2 and I have a Quest 3. So yeah, that's a positive. It doesn't have a 3.5mm jack, so going back to audio, if you are someone that previously wore headphones and used the 3.5mm jack, it doesn't have one. It does have USB-C for charging, so you could get a breakout cable that will split the audio and the charging, so that is an easy one to fix. It will only be a few quid. The other thing it doesn't have is a proximity sensor, which, if I've got this camera on there, oh, you can see it there. That little thing there's a proximity sensor. What that means is it knows when your face is, like when it's up against your face, it knows, and it will turn itself on or off. You can either have it do that, completely turn it on or off, because it's in standby, so that isn't completely, but you know what I mean. Or it will just turn the displays on and off and pause its operation when you take it off. The Quest 3S, you have to actually use the round power button to turn it on and off. Again, I guess all these little things just help to save cost a little bit. I don't know if I mentioned the price yet. The entry level model, 128 gig of storage, $289.99. Now, again, the storage for sim racing, which is the angle I'm coming from, is completely irrelevant, because you're not going to put anything on the headset if you're just buying it for sim racing, aside from perhaps virtual desktop to allow you to connect it wirelessly to your PC if you prefer VD over AirLink or over Steam Link. You might have that on there. But I think, in all honesty, most of us, even if you're just a hardcore sim racer and you're not interested in VR games, you're bound to have a little go of something else, because you've got the headset and it comes with controllers. I can't imagine anyone just buying it and literally never trying anything else ever. Curiosity is going to get the better of you. You've bought a new toy. Yes, you're going to use it for sim racing, but it does all this other functionality. You could sit there and watch films in it if you wanted to. Again, that's when headphones would be nice. You can use it for browsing the internet. You can have different browser windows open. You can play first-person shooters. You can play table tennis, golf, all sorts of relaxation software. So I think, even though this really is a sim racing review, everyone's going to have a little go at something, aren't they? Anyway, one of the other differences, and this is not something I've experienced firsthand because I don't have one, so from other reviewers, Tyrrell Woods in particular, noticed that the facial interface that comes with the Quest 3S has a tighter curve to it than what the Quest 3 and the Quest 2 do. So this isn't related to the Fresnel lenses, making it deeper, because it's even more narrow than what the Quest 2 is. It slightly reduces your field of view, because it curves in and brings your face slightly further away. And he speculated it might be that they're aiming this, especially with Christmas coming, more at children's faces, smaller heads that would require a slightly narrower facial interface. Of course, it is just a facial interface, so you can take it off and change it for another one if you wanted to. For some reason, oh, there we go. Mine didn't want to come off. Yeah, you can just remove it and fit a different one. If you find it that it is too small, or maybe you've got a more Eastern face shape that's a little flatter, That would enable you to run a shallower facial interface and get a little closer to the screen and a wider field of view, up to the point where your nose perhaps hits the lenses on the inside. So they're the differences between the 3S, or they're the things that make the 3S different from both headsets. Infrared emitters, no 3.5mm jack, no proximity sensor, and the tighter curve of the facial interface. And to recap, what it shares in common with the Quest 3, the processor and the RAM, the color pass-through, and the controllers, none of which affect sim racing experience whatsoever. And what it has in common with the Quest 2, the Fresnel lenses, rather than the pancake ones, the IPD adjuster, and the lower resolution display. Now, I mentioned the lower resolution display earlier and said I'll talk about the render resolution. Two separate things. Because it has the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2, the render resolution can still be as high as what it is on the Quest 3. Now, to clarify this, because you might be going, I don't understand, Cole. The displays are a certain resolution. Like, what are you talking about, render resolution? When it comes to VR, and I won't go into this in depth, I've got videos covering it. When it comes to VR, there is a display resolution and then the resolution at which the game is rendered. If you want to have a near native visual experience for your panel's resolution, you actually render, I think it's roughly 2.5 times higher than that in the game. And then the way the lenses work with the barrel distortion and barrel correction, that will give you a near native experience when you're looking at it through the lenses. If you actually rendered at the Quest 3 lens, Quest 3 panel resolution, which is 2064 or 2208, if you rendered it at that, once you then take into account the barrel distortion and correction, you will actually be viewing, that would be blown up basically to fill your field of view. So you'd be getting a less sharp image. The idea is, if your GPU allows it, that you run roughly 2.5 times the fixed resolution of the panel for optimum visual clarity. So the Quest 3S can render at those higher resolutions because it has the more modern CPU in there. But the display, of course, is a lower resolution display from the Quest 2. So things like screen door effect will be more noticeable because the panels are lower resolution. Is there a lot in it? Not hugely, but it's there nonetheless. So really, when it comes to the 3S for sim racing, $289.99 for the 128 gig model. As I say, you don't need big storage. You're not going to be using it. Is it a recommendation? I think the answer is, if you can't afford a Quest 3, again, the entry-level model with the smallest amount of storage, and you don't already have a Quest 2, and you're only looking to buy something new, then yes, for $289.99, you will get a decent, but not the best, VR experience for sim racing. If you can afford a Quest 3, then with the pancake lenses, which are by far still the clearest and best visual experience I've had in a VR headset around this price point. Obviously, if you want to spend $5,000, you'll find a better experience elsewhere. Then you should buy the Quest 3 because it is a big, big upgrade. That edge-to-edge clarity, that huge sweet spot, it is night and day between that and Fresnel lenses. It really is. And then, of course, the additional panel resolution, making things look a bit sharper and a little bit less screen door effect as well. If you can afford to, then yes, do so. If you can't afford to, and your budget is 290, say 300 quid, and you're buying new, then yes, the 3S is a good shout. If you're happy to buy second hand, you've then got two further options. Get a second hand Quest 3, probably for around 300 quid, if you're lucky. Or if you're really, budget conscious, buy yourself a 64 gig Quest 2. They are about £100 on Facebook Marketplace, perhaps even on eBay, especially now eBay don't charge final value fees. We're finding a lot more value items on there than we did before. Because the 64 gig Quest 2 in particular is really almost no use as a standalone VR headset because the storage is so limited. You can only have a handful of games on there before it's full up and you need to remove something to be able to play something else. But using it as a wireless PC VR headset, storage is completely irrelevant. But the 64 gig model, because of that limitation, makes its second-hand value very, very low compared to the 128 or the 256 gig model. It was the 64 gig model that I bought in for my review and for me to use when I first got a Quest 2 at launch, because I knew I'd be using it for PC VR, a little bit of sim racing, and basically no standalone, because for me, the drop in visual quality of standalone games compared to PC VR was always way too low. These days, annoyingly, PC VR games library is very small, hasn't really grown much. It's all focusing on standalone games because that is, of course, where the money is for developers, especially if you're talking about, the children end of the market. They get bought one for Christmas. They haven't got a $3,000 gaming PC, or most of them haven't. You buy them one of these, they're going to play whatever games they can play on this. So developers are focused on that, of course. But that's why the 64 gig Quest 2 goes for so little money, because it can't really be used for much. But as a PC VR headset, a sim racing headset, 100 quid, you just can't go wrong. Again, the controllers with the big tracking rings, doesn't matter because you're not going to use them. So there's your options. The Quest 3 for me, 3S, sorry, for me, is a great value headset at $289.99, whether it's going to be for sim racing, PC VR, or standalone use. If you can't afford a Quest 3, and if you don't already own a Quest 2. If you already own a Quest 2, there's absolutely no point upgrading to a Quest 3S, because, especially for sim racing, because the experience is going to be identical. The things that make the Quest 3 the better sim racing headset are not on the 3S, and that is the visual experience, the panels and the lenses. And if you don't have anything and you're looking to buy, then, as I say, second-hand market, Quest 2 64 gig, absolute bargain. Second-hand Quest 3, if you can afford it, will be the best of the bunch. It's interesting because I would used to have recommended, even to this day, the Reverb G2 V2 as the best bang for buck sim racing headset. Super comfortable, great colours, and if you've got the sweet spot right, super clear as well. But Windows Mixed Reality software has been discontinued, and there are workarounds for that at the moment, but I couldn't recommend it to people because I don't know how long those workarounds are going to continue to work. And obviously it wouldn't be fair for me to say, yeah, this is great, that's great, but go buy a G2 because it's still the best bang for buck and it's wired, so there's no compression to worry about, when the software is technically unsupported and the workarounds that exist now may not work around going forward. So I think the Quest lineup of headsets for the price point, £500 or less, are probably the best of the bunch. You do compromise with, the compressed visuals, whether it's wireless or wired. But to be honest, once you're in there and you're racing, when we talk about sim racing, or if you're playing PC VR first-person shooters and you're enjoying yourself, you just don't notice it that much. And it's about price to performance. These are cheap, especially a 64 gig Quest 2 for 100 notes. Just can't go wrong. Anyway, that's my thoughts and my sort of review-ish of the Meta Quest 3S from a sim racing point of view. And I may have strayed a little bit into, standalone as well, and PC VR, but I like to waffle. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching and take it easy.